My name is Thomas Keller, and I've been working maintenance at Cypress Haven Retirement Community for exactly 9 days. That's important to establish up front because the timeline matters. At least, that's what I tell myself now. The drive up A1A at 5:47 p.m. on my first shift was unremarkable. Flat Florida landscape, the kind of sky that turns orange, then gray, then black, without any real intermediary. Cypress Haven sits about 4 miles inland from the coast, a sprawling complex of connected buildings done in that aggressively beige architectural style designed to be comforting. Terraces with wicker furniture nobody sits in, manicured lawns that always look slightly too green. The kind of place where people come to finish out their final chapters in climate-controlled dignity. I'd been out of work for 8 months. Construction took a hit, and I took the hit with it. 34, divorced, no kids, decent, with my hands, but not overqualified enough to land anything permanent. The Cypress Haven job posting promised $16.50 an hour, plus benefits, nights only, entry-level maintenance. It wasn't a career, it was a lifeline. Dale Hutchins met me at the employee entrance at 6:15 p.m. He was a man in his mid-50s with the kind of tan that comes from 30 years of Florida summers and a reluctance to wear sunscreen. His shirt said, "Facilities Manager," over the pocket, though the letters were faded enough that I suspected the shirt predated most of his tenure. "Thomas, right?" He didn't extend his hand, just gestured vaguely toward the building. "Let's get this done quick. I've got to supervise the dinner service." The orientation took 22 minutes. I counted the minutes on my watch because even then, something about the pace felt off. Like Dale was rushing through a script he'd performed 1,000 times and couldn't wait to stop performing. "You'll work nights, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 days a week," he said, walking me through corridors that all looked identical. Cream-colored walls, landscape prints of marsh grasses, the faint smell of industrial cleaner mixed with something else. Not unpleasant, just present. Bathrooms, common areas, trash, minor repairs. You see something broken, you log it. You see something that needs a professional, you tell me. You don't try to be a plumber or electrician. Understood? Understood. We have long-standing protocols here at Cypress Haven, Dale continued, barely glancing at me. Things work a certain way. People, residents, they like routine. They like knowing the facility is being maintained properly. You do your job clean and quiet, and everybody's happy. What kind of protocols? I asked. Dale's pace slowed for just a moment. His jaw tightened. "I'll print you out a list. Specific areas are off limits after 10 p.m. unless you get authorization from me personally. Maintenance restricted. You'll see them marked on the schematic. Why are they restricted? Because they are," he said flatly. "That's not a question you need answered. That's just something you need to accept." We turned a corner, and I noticed something. The residence hallway was beginning to fill up, even though dinner service had presumably just started. I saw a woman in a lavender cardigan shuffle past, moving with purpose, but no particular urgency. Then an older man in a polo shirt. Then another woman I could have sworn I'd seen twice already, coming from different directions. They moved past us without acknowledgement. No eye contact, no nods, just the soft whisper of slippers on linoleum and the occasional creak of a walker. "That's unusual," I said. "I thought dinner service was happening." Dale didn't break stride. "Some residents eat at different times. We accommodate various schedules." But it was 6:37 p.m. Dinner service, according to the posted schedule I'd glimpsed in the lobby, ran from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. The hallway was filling up in the opposite direction, as if people were leaving the dining area rather than entering it. Dale showed me the supply closets, the equipment room, the protocol sheet for bathroom cleaning. Everything was standard, the kind of procedures any maintenance worker would recognize. Squeegee the shower after each deep clean. Restock toilet paper by count, not by observation. Empty trash bins when they reach 75% capacity, no more, no less. There's a supply closet on the 3rd floor, Dale mentioned, practically in passing. Main supply room is here on ground level. Use that one. The 3rd floor closet is for custodial use only. Why's there a separate supply closet for the same floor? Historical reasons, Dale said, which explained nothing. We passed several residents in the 3rd floor hallway. They were moving with that same coordinated casualness, drifting between rooms as if following an invisible choreography. One of them, a thin man with white hair and glasses, turned his head as we passed, made eye contact with me for exactly 1 second, then looked away. That 1 second glance contained something I couldn't name. Not hostility, not quite recognition either. Something closer to assessment. You'll get a full tour once you're officially onboarded, Dale said, and we were already heading back downstairs. That's happening tomorrow night during your shift. HR runs it. Just basic stuff. Emergency procedures, equipment inventory, payroll forms. Should take about an hour. What about tonight? Tonight you shadow me. Observe. Get a feel for the rhythm of things. The rhythm of things. That phrase lodged in my brain like a splinter. We reached the ground floor, and Dale handed me a key card and a laminated schematic of the facility. The layout was more complex than the building's exterior suggested. 3 main wings radiating from a central hub, multiple hallways branching off at angles that seemed almost deliberately confusing. There were rooms marked with abbreviations I'd have to decode later. PT, SRC, OBS, MNT, RES. Maintenance restricted. 3 of them, scattered across the facility's footprint. 1 on each floor, it appeared. Don't forget the 10 p.m. restriction, Dale said. Not being difficult, there are residents who sleep earlier, and we respect their rest. After 10, maintenance work is minimal unless authorized. You'll find a call button in each closet for emergencies. A call button in a maintenance closet? New protocol. Makes things easier. We did a walkthrough of the common areas. A small library with books that looked untouched. A television room where a handful of residents sat in absolute silence, watching Jeopardy, without reacting to the questions or answers. Their faces were placid, synchronized in their inattention. The dining room was empty now, tables cleared, floors already mopped. And then, as we were heading back toward the administrative offices, Dale casually mentioned something that didn't quite register until hours later. The last maintenance guy, Robert, he had trouble accepting how things work here. Some people can't adapt to Cypress Haven's culture. If you start to feel uncomfortable with the protocols, best to let me know early. Save everybody the hassle. What happened to him? He quit, Dale said. Moved out of state. Needed a change of scenery. But his tone, flat, measured, didn't match the words. It suggested something else had happened. Something that involved more than a simple resignation and relocation. By the time my first shift ended at 6 a.m., I'd scrubbed 4 bathrooms, emptied 16 trash cans, and mopped the main corridor twice. I'd also noticed that the residents moved through the hallways in organized patterns, shifting positions every hour on the hour like pieces on a board. I'd observed that several of them appeared in different sections of the facility, despite the architecture making such movement seem inefficient. I'd found a locked maintenance closet on the 3rd floor, one not marked on my schematic, and when I'd asked Dale about it, his face had done something strange. A pause, a tightening around the eyes, a decision being made behind them. "That's not on your schematic," he'd said, "because you don't need access to it." And then, quieter, "Don't let me catch you trying to get into that closet, Thomas." I left my shift tired, unsettled, and already wondering if I'd made a mistake taking this job. But I needed the money, and the strangeness hadn't crossed any lines yet. It was just oddness, just institutional quirk. I didn't know then that I'd already crossed a line simply by noticing that closet, that the cycle had already begun to shift, that Dale's warning wasn't a threat, it was a mercy. By the fourth night, I'd stopped pretending the residents' schedule made sense. They slept during the day, or appeared to anyway. Doors closed, curtains drawn, the kind of silence that comes from a facility in afternoon lockdown. But the moment the sun started its descent and the staff brought around dinner trays, something shifted. An invisible switch flipped. The residents emerged from their rooms like it was 7 a.m. instead of 7 p.m., moving through the hallways with what I can only describe as purpose. Not frantic purpose, nothing desperate, just a kind of methodical, choreographed drift from one section of the building to another. They'd walk in clusters, never quite talking to each other, but never quite ignoring one another either. A woman in a teal blouse, an elderly man with a cane, two residents who looked like they might have been married, moving in parallel but never touching. They'd reach a corner, pause for exactly 15 seconds, then continue to the next section. I'd started timing it. The pattern repeated every hour on the hour until 3 a.m., at which point the residents gradually returned to their rooms and the hallways fell silent again. By 4 a.m., the entire facility felt abandoned, except for the skeleton staff in the administrative offices. On my fourth night, I tried speaking to one of them. I was mopping the West Wing corridor when a man in gray slacks and a cardigan came shuffling past. Early 70s, maybe. He had the particular kind of still handsome face that suggested he'd been attractive in his youth. The kind of face that doesn't age so much as it settles. "Evening," I said, friendly, casual. "How are you tonight?" The man stopped mid-stride, his eyes fixed on me with the intensity of someone being asked a math problem in a language they didn't quite speak. His mouth opened, closed. Then he continued walking without acknowledgement, as if I'd been a piece of furniture he'd briefly considered. I tried again with a woman an hour later. Same result, except her response was a kind of low, wordless hum. Not quite a word, not quite a rejection. Just a sound. By 2 a.m., I'd given up on being friendly. I was angry, frustrated, and deeply tired. I was also alone in the supply room when I heard the voice. "You shouldn't have asked about the third-floor closet." I spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe of early 60s, with short gray hair and the kind of kind eyes that you don't often see in places like this. She wore a pink robe over pajamas, and something about her presence felt intentional in a way the other residents' presence didn't. "I didn't ask," I said. "Dale just brought it up. That means you're observant." She stepped inside and closed the supply room door behind her. The gesture was casual but deliberate. Observant people usually ask follow-up questions. "I'm Mrs. Chen. I've been here for 8 years, though my paperwork says I've been here for 3. That discrepancy exists for reasons I'll get to if you're patient. But first I want to know, how much have you figured out?" "I haven't figured out anything," I said, which was a lie, and she knew it. "The residents don't sleep normal hours," Mrs. Chen continued. "The staff moves through their shifts with the kind of efficiency that suggests they're executing a routine rather than performing actual work. The architecture doesn't quite match up. Did you notice the third floor seems longer than it should be? And your supervisor warned you away from a maintenance closet with an intensity that had nothing to do with floor cleaning. So, how much have you figured out?" I set down my mop. My hands were still wet, and I dried them on my jeans. "I figured out that something weird is happening here," I admitted. "I haven't figured out what." Mrs. Chen nodded, as if I'd given the correct answer on a test. "Some residents here have been living at Cypress Haven longer than their official records indicate, some of them much longer. They don't age, not visibly anyway. They follow a very specific routine, up at dusk, organized movement through predetermined corridors until 3 a.m., then back to rooms. The staff maintains this routine. The protocols you're being asked to follow exist to maintain it. Maintain what, exactly? The cycle, she said simply. And before you ask what the cycle maintains, I'll tell you, I don't know. Not precisely. But I know it's kept something stable for a very long time. I know that disrupting it creates consequences. And I know that you opening that locked closet, or trying to, which I can feel you thinking about very loudly, will start a disruption. How can you feel me thinking? I asked, which might have been the wrong question, because Mrs. Chen's expression shifted into something more complex. Because I've been here for 8 years, and some things have started to blur, she said. The line between resident and observer, between participating and witnessing. It's a slow process, but it happens to everyone who stays too long and pays too much attention. You're saying this place is some kind of cult? I'm saying this place is older than the word cult in its modern sense, Mrs. Chen replied. And I'm saying that if you want to leave, you should leave now. Tell them you found better work. Tell them your mother got sick and you need to move. Tell them anything. But don't stay long enough to become curious about what's in that closet. Don't stay long enough for the cycle to notice you. The cycle notices people? Mrs. Chen moved toward the door. It notices everyone, but it only acknowledges those who try to break it. Dale is banking on you being too ordinary to care. Be too ordinary to care, Thomas. Mop your floors. Empty your trash. Collect your paycheck. Don't ask questions. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with wet hands and a racing mind. I didn't sleep when I got home. Instead, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to the public library and requested microfilm of local newspapers from the past 15 years. The librarian was nice about it, didn't question why a maintenance worker wanted to dig through archives at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It took me an hour to find it. A headline from 2019, small, buried in the Metro section. Cypress Haven employee goes missing. Robert Mitchell, 41, had worked maintenance at Cypress Haven for 2 years. Last seen leaving his shift on a Friday morning. His car was found in the parking lot 3 days later. Keys on the seat, driver's side door open. The article speculated foul play. The follow-up articles speculated less and less until they stopped appearing. There was no mention of Cypress Haven responding to questions. No statement from the facility, just silence. Then the story dissolving into the background radiation of local news. That night, my 5th shift, I found something. I was restocking supplies in the second-floor hallway when I noticed a door left slightly ajar. Inside was what appeared to be a residence activity room, except the lighting was dim and there was a single ledger sitting on a table in the center, a logbook, the kind you'd see in a medical facility. The entries weren't medical notes, they were routing sequences. 3rd floor rotation, 8:15, 8:30 p.m. Main corridor, Chen, Hartwell, Rodriguez. Western wing rotation, 8:45 to 9:00 p.m. Vasquez, Kim, Okonkwo. Hundreds of entries. The handwriting changed periodically. Different eras, different pens, but the structure remained identical. Residence names, time windows, spatial sequences, going back. I flipped to the front cover, looking for a date. The first entry was from 1963. The most recent was from tonight, 8:15, 8:30 p.m. Chen, Hartwell, Rodriguez, Keller, my name, listed among the residents, in a rotation sequence scheduled for 3 hours from now. I was holding the logbook when I heard Dale's voice in the hallway outside. "He's going to figure it out," Dale was saying. "I can see it. Observant ones always do." Another voice, Mrs. Voss, the facility director, a woman I'd only met once during orientation, replied, "Then we'll need to manage that. Is he someone who can be managed?" "Too early to tell," Dale said. "The last one couldn't accept it, tried to run, and now Now he's gone, Dale said flatly. Some acceptances take time. Some don't happen at all. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the building. I closed the logbook carefully, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and finished my shift in a kind of dissociative daze. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, I'd made a decision. I would not leave. I would not quit. I would not run like Robert Mitchell had run. Instead, I would open that closet. I would figure out what the cycle actually was, and I would do it before whatever arrangement existed between Cypress Haven and the people living here decided whether I was someone worth keeping. Dale handed me the protocol list on my 6th night without preamble, just a stapled sheaf of papers, yellowed at the edges, with his initials at the bottom and a date from 1998. Everything you need to know, he said, though his tone suggested it was everything I didn't need to know, but was required to pretend to understand. I read it over coffee in the break room at 6:30 p.m., before my shift officially started. The first page was standard: cleaning procedures, equipment maintenance, emergency protocols, nothing unusual. Page 2 started to shift into stranger territory. Room 307, toilet malfunction, recurring. Do not repair. Maintenance log only. Water damage is expected and acceptable. 3rd floor west corridor. Stains on baseboard. Unknown origin. Do not remove or treat. Photograph any changes monthly. Report to Dale. Rooms 412, 418, 423. Light fixtures. Chronic burnout. Replace only with bulbs from supply closet B. Do not use standard replacements. The list went on. 17 items, each one describing something broken that I was explicitly forbidden from fixing. Or rather, things I could maintain, document them, photograph them, log them, but never actually repair. Questions? Dale stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. Yeah, I said. A lot of them. Why would we have maintenance positions if we're not actually maintaining anything? You're maintaining the appearance of maintenance, Dale said flatly. You're keeping records. You're ensuring the facility runs smoothly on the surface. That's the job. That's not a job. That's theater. Dale's jaw tightened. He stepped into the break room and closed the door behind him. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, stripped of its usual false friendliness. You're new, so I'm going to explain this once, and then I'm going to expect you to stop asking questions. Cypress Haven operates under certain long-standing agreements. Those agreements require that certain things remain maintained in their current state, not fixed, not changed, maintained. The residents here, some of them, have been living here for decades. They have very specific needs. And one of those needs is that certain aspects of the facility remain consistent with how they've always been. That's insane, I said. That's irrelevant, Dale replied. You can accept it or you can leave. But if you leave, you don't talk to anyone about what you've seen or heard here. You don't make phone calls, you don't file complaints. You get in your car and you drive away, and you forget Cypress Haven exists. Those are the terms, and if I don't agree to those terms, Dale's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, a kind of cold calculation. Then we'll have to manage that situation, he said, just like we managed Robert. Robert quit, I said. Robert tried to open the 3rd floor closet, Dale corrected. He tried to find out what was really happening here. And then he tried to leave and report what he'd found to the authorities. We couldn't allow that. The way he said it, so matter of fact, so devoid of any real menace, was somehow more terrifying than if he'd explicitly threatened me. What happened to him? I asked. He's not your concern, Dale said. Your concern is whether you can follow protocol. Can you? I looked back at the list. 17 things I was forbidden from fixing in a maintenance job. I can follow protocol, I lied. Dale nodded once and left the break room. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, And then I was alone with coffee that had gone cold and a list of impossible directives. Over the next 3 nights, I tested the boundaries of those directives. Not openly, carefully, subtly. On night 7, I checked the light bulbs in room 412. The fixture had 3 sockets. 2 held bulbs that seemed fine. 1 socket was empty, and inside it, wrapped in what looked like a decades-old cloth, was a bulb that had burned black. The glass was discolored from the inside, as if something had happened to it beyond normal filament failure. When I unwrapped it, the cloth, museum-quality fragile, fell apart in my hands. The date embroidered on one corner, barely legible, read 1972. I put the bulb back exactly as I'd found it, photographed it, logged it. On night 8, I investigated the toilet malfunction in 307. The water ran continuously, a soft hiss that never quite stopped. When I traced the mechanism, I found that it had been deliberately rigged. A small brass valve, clearly not original, had been installed to prevent the fill tank from ever fully sealing. Someone had designed this malfunction, engineered it to be permanent. I found similar modifications in rooms 418 and 423. The light sockets were fitted with custom adapters that wouldn't accept standard bulbs. The baseboards in the 3rd floor corridor had been treated with something that repelled cleaning agents. I tested it on night 10, just a small corner, and the stain actually resisted the chemicals, seeming to intensify under the treatment rather than fade. Everything on Dale's protocol list wasn't maintenance gone wrong. It was maintenance gone right, designed to maintain something in a broken state. Engineered decay. On my 10th night, I asked Mrs. Chen about it. I found her in the library at 2:15 a.m., sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the parking lot lights. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "The broken things," I said. "They're not broken by accident." "No," she agreed. "Someone deliberately made them stay broken." "Yes." "Why?" Mrs. Chen took a long time answering, long enough that I thought she might not answer at all. "Because the cycle needs reference points," she finally said. "Fixed things, broken things, unchanged things. It needs the building to be exactly as it's always been. If you fix the toilet in 307, something shifts. Not dramatically, but it shifts. The residents' rotations become slightly off pattern. Hallways that usually feel the right length feel shorter. Time gets weird. You're describing something that sounds impossible. I'm describing something that's been maintained for 60 years, Mrs. Chen said. Long enough that impossible becomes normal. Long enough that the people running this place stop questioning why they're doing it and just keep doing it because it's always been done. Dale said they'd handle me like they handled Robert. They will, Mrs. Chen said without emotion, unless you handle them first. How? She turned to look at me. In the dim library light, her face looked older than I'd initially thought. Or perhaps it was just that the facade had slipped. Perhaps Mrs. Chen had been here so long that the decay that affected the building had started affecting her too. You open the closet, she said. You find out what's inside, and then you decide whether you're going to let the cycle continue or whether you're going to break it. What if I break it? Then things become very unpredictable very quickly, Mrs. Chen said. The residents will sense it. Dale will sense it. The whole facility will start to come apart at the seams. It won't be pleasant, but at least it won't be permanent. And if I don't break it, then you'll be exactly like Dale, she said. 30 years from now, maybe 40, you'll be training the next new maintenance hire. You'll be warning them about the closet. You'll be explaining that Robert quit and moved away, or that he was just unstable and never lasted more than a few weeks anyway. You'll have forgotten why any of it mattered. You'll just be maintaining the protocol because the protocol is what you maintain. She turned back to the window. The choice is yours, Thomas, but choose quickly. Dale's getting impatient, and impatient people in places like this tend to make decisions for you. I left her there in the library and went back to my work. I mopped hallways. I emptied trash. I maintained the broken toilet in 307 by photographing it and writing it in the log, just like the protocol demanded. But on my 11th night, I finally obtained a copy of the building schematics from the administrative files. Just walked in when the office was empty and photographed every page with my phone. And I started planning how I'd pick the lock on the third-floor closet. The lock was old, but solid. I'd need proper tools, and I'd need to do it when Dale wasn't present. I'd need to be ready for whatever came next. What I didn't realize was that Dale had already noticed my curiosity, and that he was making decisions about what to do with me. Decisions that would take effect much sooner than I anticipated. I picked the lock on my 13th night. I'd bought the tools online, nothing suspicious, just a basic locksmith set you could get from any hardware store. I'd practiced on the padlock on my apartment's storage shed until I could do it in under 30 seconds. The third-floor closet lock was older, but simpler than anything I'd practiced on. I had it open in 45 seconds. Dale was in the administrative offices handling payroll. Mrs. Chen was in her room, or at least she'd returned to her room at the standard time. The residence rotation had finished at 3 a.m., and it was now 3:17. The hallway was empty. The night had that particular quality of absolute silence that comes right before dawn, when even the building's mechanical systems seem to hold their breath. I opened the closet door. The air that came out wasn't stale. It was worse than stale. It was old in a way that air shouldn't be able to be, like opening a tomb, like decades of the same atmosphere recycled through the same space without ever touching the outside world. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The closet was deeper than the building's exterior dimensions suggested it should be. I was aware of that immediately, not dramatically, not like I'd stepped into a portal to another dimension or anything that obvious. Just a sense of wrong proportions, the way optical illusions are wrong. The closet should have been 5 feet deep, maybe 6. This one went back at least 12. The walls were lined with supplies. Uniforms, yes, dozens of them, in sizes ranging from small to XOL, all bearing the Cypress Haven logo from different eras. I could track the fashion changes by looking at them. 60s cuts, 80s synthetics, modern polyester blends, all of them preserved in plastic bags that had turned brittle with age. There were cleaning products too, but not the standard commercial brands I'd been using. These were older, glass bottles with faded labels from companies that probably went defunct decades ago. And mixed in with them were things that didn't make sense in a maintenance closet. Medical supplies, IV bags still in their sealed packaging, syringes in boxes from the 1970s. And at the very back, on a shelf that seemed to recede into the closet's impossible depth, there was a ledger, not the resident's activity logbook I'd found. Something older, bound in leather that had warped from age. The cover had no title, just a date stamped in faded gold, 1963. I reached for it. My hand moved slowly, as if the air itself had thickened. When my fingers touched the leather, I felt something, a vibration, almost imperceptible, like touching a speaker that's playing music too quiet to hear. I opened the ledger. The first pages were written in a handwriting that looked almost like calligraphy, formal, deliberate. The entries read like medical notes, but the terminology was archaic, almost unrecognizable. Subject 1, admission stable. Metabolic adjustment protocol initiated. Time drift. Minimal. Subject 2, admission stable. Subject 3, status quo achieved. Rotational sequence holding. Further in, the handwriting changed. Then changed again. Different eras, different pens, different hands. But the same basic structure. Subjects being monitored. Protocols being maintained, rotational sequences being preserved. And then I found a more recent entry. Dale's handwriting, I was almost certain. 2019, Subject R, Mitchell, showed excessive curiosity regarding operational parameters. Subject did not accept protocol explanation. Subject attempted breach of containment protocol. Subject removed. Operational stability maintained. 2024, Subject T, Keller, demonstrates high observational capacity. Subject has accessed restricted schematics. Subject has accessed residence activity log. Subject will require intervention within 96 hours or will attempt breach. Recommendation: management per established protocol. My hands were shaking. I dropped the ledger and it fell open to a page near the back. A page that was mostly blank except for a simple table. Subject name: admission year. Last documented activity. Below that was a list. Dozens of names. People who'd worked maintenance at Cypress Haven over the decades. Every single one had a date in that last column. And next to every date was the word integrated, except for the names at the very bottom of the list. Those just said active. One of them was Dale Hutchins, listed as admitted in 1987. I was photographing the pages with my phone when I lost time. One moment I was standing in the closet, phone camera open, hands moving through the routine of documentation. The next moment I was in the hallway, the closet door still open behind me, and my phone's clock read 5:43 a.m. 2 hours and 26 minutes had passed. I had no memory of leaving the closet, no recollection of walking back down the hallway, no awareness of anything between 3:17 and 5:43. I shoved the phone into my pocket and closed the closet door, locking it again with trembling fingers. My heart was moving too fast. My breath felt shallow. I was hyperventilating, and I couldn't stop. I made it to the bathroom on the second floor and threw up into a toilet that flushed with perfect normalcy, as if the world hadn't just revealed itself to be fundamentally wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The rest of my shift passed in a fugue state. I mopped hallways. I emptied trash. I acted normal because normal was all I had left to hold on to. By the time 6 a.m. came around, I was almost functional again. Almost. But something was wrong with how the building felt. The hallways seemed slightly narrower. The lighting seemed slightly dimmer, even though the fluorescent panels were all operational. And when I walked past the residents' rooms, I became aware of movement just beyond my peripheral vision. Residents stirring earlier than they should have been, as if they were waking to an alarm I couldn't hear. As I was leaving, I found a resident I'd never seen before standing in the main hallway. Young, impossibly young for Cypress Haven, maybe 30, if that. He wore the facility's residents wear, but there was no membership ID on his wrist, no documentation of his arrival that I'd ever seen in any of the logs. He smiled at me. It wasn't a kind smile. "You opened the door," he said. "Thank you. The cycle was holding so tight. We could barely move. But you opened the door, and now it's finally unbalanced." I started. "You don't understand yet," he said, "but you will. The more you move around the building now, the more you'll feel it. The cycle is noticing you, and once it notices, it starts to want things from you." He turned and walked back toward his room, or where I assumed his room was. In the dimmer hallway, it was hard to track exactly where he went. I left through the employee exit. My car started fine. The drive home was normal. Traffic lights, street signs, the familiar roads. But the whole time, I had the sensation of something being slightly out of alignment, like the world was a photograph that had been shifted 0.5 millimeter to the left. When I got to my apartment, I checked my phone to look at the photos I'd taken in the closet. My phone showed 7 images successfully saved, but when I looked at them, the screen was full of static, gray and white noise. No images at all. All 7 photos had corrupted, or been deleted, or somehow unmade. But I knew what I'd photographed. I could still see it in my mind, with perfect clarity. The ledgers, the list of names, Dale's handwriting, the date of my own integration, already written down somewhere, just waiting to be officially documented. I didn't sleep that day. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what had happened in those missing 2 hours and 26 minutes. And around 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Dale. "You feeling all right?" he asked, his voice carrying that particular false concern that made my skin crawl. "Fine," I said. "Why? You look a little rough this morning, pale. Staff noticed. Wondered if maybe you were coming down with something. We need you in top form. Things are happening at Cypress Haven, important things. The residents are very active right now." "I'm fine," I repeated. "Good," Dale said. "See you tonight. Oh, and Thomas? Don't bother opening that closet again. It won't open twice for the same person. That's just how it works." He hung up. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that none of it was real, that I'd imagined the closet, that I'd dreamed the missing time, that I was having some kind of mental break. But I knew better. The cycle had noticed me, and something fundamental had shifted in the way the building moved around me. The residents' rotations that night would include me in them. The hallways would start to loop differently when I walked them. The time wouldn't sync up properly anymore. I was beginning to integrate. Mrs. Chen found me on my 16th night, sitting alone in the break room at 2 a.m., staring at a cup of coffee I'd stopped being able to taste around midnight. "You're experiencing time distortion," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And the hallways feel wrong." "Yes." She sat down across from me without asking permission. In the fluorescent break room light, I could see something I'd missed before, a kind of translucence to her skin, as if she were being slowly erased or slowly integrated. The terms seemed interchangeable now. "I can explain some of it," she said quietly. "Not all of it. Nobody here truly understands all of it, but I can tell you what I've pieced together in 8 years of living inside the machine." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're going to die otherwise," Mrs. Chen said flatly. "Not immediately, but you'll integrate so completely that you'll cease to exist as Thomas Keller and become something else. A pattern, a maintenance subroutine, something that follows the rotations and maintains the protocols and never again remembers why any of it matters." I pushed the coffee away. My hand passed through the cup's handle, and for a fraction of a second, it felt like my fingers were moving through gelatin instead of air. Then the sensation passed, and my hand was solid again. I didn't comment on it. Mrs. Chen didn't comment on it either. "Cypress Haven was built in 1963, she began, but it wasn't built as a retirement community. It was built as a containment facility. The people who built it were part of an organization that had discovered something, or summoned something, or invited something. The language gets fuzzy here. That needed to be kept stabilized, kept in one place, kept following a very specific routine that prevents it from expanding, I suppose, becoming active, causing problems." "What is it?" I asked. "I don't know," Mrs. Chen said. "I've been here 8 years, and I don't know. Nobody knows. Not Dale, not the administration, not even the oldest residents. There's just a collective understanding that if the rotations stop, if the protocols fail, if anything in the building's configuration changes, something bad happens." "What kind of bad?" "Apocalypse-adjacent bad," Mrs. Chen said. "I found references in old files, fragments, people in the 1960s talking about containment breach scenarios and catastrophic cascade failure. The documents get vague when they talk about what actually happens. It's like the people writing them couldn't quite bring themselves to imagine it, or couldn't remember it properly, or were being deliberately obscure." She leaned forward. "What I do know is this. Cypress Haven operates under a covenant, An agreement made between the people who built this facility and whatever is being contained here. The covenant has specific terms. Residents must arrive and never leave. They must never age. They must follow the rotational sequences perfectly, down to the minute. The building must remain exactly as it was. Broken things stay broken. Stains stay stained. The architecture must never change. And there must always be staff. People to maintain the protocols. People to keep the machine running. And if the covenant is broken? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then the cycle resets, Mrs. Chen said. And everybody who's integrated into it gets caught in the reset. You become part of the sequence that starts over and over. You'll experience the same rotations, the same hours, the same protocols, infinitely, until either someone restabilizes the cycle or until you forget that you ever wanted anything different. I tried to stand up, to walk away, to find some way to process what she was telling me. My legs didn't respond. Quite right. I made it to my feet, but the motion felt delayed, like I was moving through thick water. The only way out is to fully integrate or to fully resist, Mrs. Chen continued. Partial resistance is what kills people. Partial resistance is what happened to Robert Mitchell. He was too aware to accept the cycle, but not aware enough to break it. So he got stuck in the liminal space between acceptance and rejection. He tried to run. The building wouldn't let him. What do you mean the building wouldn't let him? I mean that the doors relocated, Mrs. Chen said. He tried to leave through the north exit and found the east exit instead. He tried the east exit and ended up back in the lobby. He drove his car toward the highway and the road curved back toward the facility. He couldn't leave because the building had already begun to integrate him. You can't exit something you're becoming part of. I looked down at my hands. They looked normal. But when I moved them, there was that same fractional delay, like I was watching a video recording of my own movement instead of experiencing it directly. How do I fix this? I asked. You don't, Mrs. Chen said. You choose. Integration or resistance. Full commitment to the cycle or complete refusal of it. There's no middle ground. And what happens if I choose resistance? Mrs. Chen's expression went soft, almost pitying. The cycle fights back, she said. Right now the building is trying to absorb you gently. The time distortion, the sensory slips, the weird hallway geometry. That's the cycle in welcoming mode. If you resist, if you actively try to break the protocols or damage the containment structure, the cycle shifts into defensive mode. It accelerates the integration. It pulls you toward the rotations faster. It makes the time distortion worse until you can't tell the difference between night and day. Eventually, you get pulled into the resident schedule completely. You become part of the sequence. You walk the hallways at 3 a.m. with everyone else, and you forget why walking is wrong. And if I choose integration, if I just accept it, then you have time, Mrs. Chen said. Years, maybe. You work your shifts. You follow the protocols. You train the next maintenance worker when the time comes. You lie to them about the third-floor closet, and you feel guilty about the lie. And then eventually you stop feeling guilty because guilt is something that washes away when you're integrated. And one day, probably decades from now, you'll notice you can't remember what your apartment looked like. You won't remember your real name. You'll just know that you maintain Cypress Haven, and that this is how things have always been, and that this is how they will always be. I sat back down. The chair felt unstable beneath me, as if it might dissolve. There's a third option, Mrs. Chen said quietly, but it's dangerous, and it involves someone making a choice that will destroy their own life. What is... You could deliberately break the covenant, Mrs. Chen said. You could damage the containment structure so severely that the cycle can't be maintained. You could force a cascade failure that would unravel the whole system. But whoever does that, whoever forces the breach, They'd be caught in the cascade. They'd probably die, or integrate so completely and so quickly that death would be a mercy. Why are you telling me this? Mrs. Chen stood up. Her hands were becoming translucent in the fluorescent light. She was fading. I could see the break room wall through her palms. Because I've been here 8 years, and I'm tired, she said. Because I can feel the integration pulling me down deeper with every passing night. Because I want someone new to have the information I should have had when I arrived. And because sometimes the only ethical choice is to give someone the truth about the trap they're in, even if they can't escape it. She moved toward the door. She was almost invisible now, just a suggestion of a shape in the light. You have time to decide, she said, but not much. The cycle is waiting for you to accept or resist. Once you make that choice explicitly, the process accelerates. You'll feel it happen. When you do, remember this conversation. Remember that you had options, even if you couldn't take them. She left the break room. When I looked at the clock, it read 4:37 a.m. I'd lost 2 more hours without noticing, and when I walked out into the main hallway, I saw something that made my blood cold. The residents were already awake. The rotations had started early, and they were all moving in my direction. Their movements synchronized, their faces blank, walking toward me through hallways that seemed to be reconfiguring themselves with every step they took. The cycle was no longer waiting. It was coming to collect. I ran, not away from the building. I was smart enough to know that wouldn't work. Instead, I ran toward the administrative offices. If I was going to make a choice, I needed information. And the one thing a containment facility would have in abundance was documentation. The front desk was unmanned at 4:47 a.m. The administrative wing was dark, except for the exit signs bleeding red into the corridors. I found the file room on my 3rd try, a locked door that my locksmith skills got through in under 2 minutes. Desperation sharpens certain skill sets. The files were meticulously organized. I'll give them that. Everything cataloged, cross-referenced, dated. I started pulling folders at random, my eyes scanning for anything that might explain what was actually happening here. Resident intake forms, medical records, maintenance schedules dating back to 1963, and then, buried in a filing cabinet marked administrative, a census ledger. The official resident count for Cypress Haven was 47. That's what the state records showed. That's what the marketing materials advertised. 47 seniors in a comfortable, secure facility designed for their golden years. But the ledger I was holding told a different story. I counted the entries 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. 234 distinct resident names dating back to 1963. 234 people who had been admitted to Cypress Haven over the past 61 years. Yet only 47 were currently listed as active. The ledger didn't explain what happened to the other 187, but there was a column, a status column. Next to each name, one of 3 notations: active, integrated, or cycle closed. Most of them said integrated. I was standing there, processing this, when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the file room. Slow, methodical, the kind of walking that doesn't stop or hesitate. The footsteps passed the file room door, then they kept going. I waited until they faded completely before I started photographing pages. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady, but I got them. The census records, the intake forms, the status notations, all of it. And then I found something else, a memorandum dated 1987 from someone named Dr. Elaine Voss to the facility's board of directors. The integration process has stabilized, it read. What was previously a 9 to 11 month timeline has now been reduced to 4 to 6 months, depending on individual susceptibility factors. Staff integration is proceeding on schedule. Dale Hutchins has completed his preliminary phase and is now fully functional in his maintenance capacity. recommend he be retained indefinitely. Dale, a staff member who'd been integrated, which meant Dale wasn't human, or wasn't fully human, or was human the same way the residents were human, present, functional, but fundamentally altered by whatever the cycle had done to him. I kept photographing. My phone's battery was at 14% when I found the most recent addition to the file, a handwritten note dated 2 weeks ago in handwriting I recognized as Dale's. Subject T, Keller, integration timeline, accelerated due to closet breach, estimated full integration, 8 to 14 days. Subject shows appropriate resistance markers. Recommend monitored acceleration. Subject may become valuable long-term asset if integration is completed successfully. 8 to 14 days. It had been 16 days since I started. The integration wasn't just happening, it was ahead of schedule. I shoved the phone into my pocket and backed out of the file room, locking the door behind me more out of habit than hope. If they were monitoring me, and clearly they were, they already knew I was here. I needed to get to the front desk. I needed to access the resident database. I needed to understand the actual count. The main lobby was empty, sterile, the kind of space that looks designed for people but feels wrong without them. The front desk computer was locked, but the password was written on a sticky note tucked under the, its keyboard. Cyprus 1963. Cute. The facility director's sense of humor, probably. The database opened. I navigated to the resident roster and found the discrepancy immediately. The system showed 47 residents. But when I pulled up the actual room assignments, I found 82 individual room numbers with active occupancy status. 82 residents, all with medical files, all with intake dates, all registered in the system as living here, except the front-facing count never reflected that number. The official records, the ones that were submitted to the state, the ones that appeared in marketing materials and licensing documents, they all said 47, which meant that 35 residents existed in a kind of administrative limbo, documented but not officially counted, present but not publicly acknowledged. Interesting, isn't it? I turned. A woman stood in the administrative office doorway. She was wearing a cardigan over pajamas, and she looked to be in her early 60s. But there was something off about her, the same translucent quality I'd started noticing in Mrs. Chen, like she wasn't entirely present. "Mrs. Voss?" I asked. "In the flesh," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Literal flesh, in my case. I've been integrated so long that I forget what it was like to be anything else. "How long?" 37 years, she said. "I was the facility director when I admitted myself to the program. Seemed only right that the person in charge should be committed to the covenant fully." She stepped into the office. I backed away from the desk, but there was nowhere to go. "You've figured out the census issue," she continued. "Congratulations. That's actually more perceptive than most new staff members. Robert Mitchell never even got that far before he panicked and tried to run." "What happens to the residents who are integrated?" I asked. "They continue their rotations," Mrs. Voss said simply. "They become part of the cycle's maintenance system. They walk their designated routes, they perform their designated functions, and they help keep the containment stable. They're not prisoners exactly, they're just permanently employed. They're not people anymore. They're people in the way the building is a building," Mrs. Voss said. "They're structure, architecture, they're part of the system now, and the system is very good at being a system." She moved closer. I could see through her now, just barely. Her hand, when she gestured, was almost translucent in the emergency lighting. "You have a choice to make," she said. "Dale wants to accelerate your integration. I'm inclined to let him. You're observant, thorough, and you don't panic easily. Those are valuable traits in someone who's going to be maintaining this place for the next 40 years. But Mrs. Chen thought you might be the type to resist, to try something stupid. so I'm here to offer you an alternative." "What kind of alternative?" "Full cooperation," Mrs. Voss said. "You accept integration without fighting it. You become part of the staff, or part of the resident rotation, depending on how this plays out. And in exchange, I'll ensure that the process is painless. You won't experience the time distortion as intensely. You won't lose yourself in fragments. You'll integrate smoothly, and one day you'll wake up and realize you've accepted your new existence, and you won't even remember being upset about it. And if I don't accept, then Dale will accelerate the integration anyway, but without my mediation. You'll experience cascade failure on top of standard integration. You'll lose time in much larger chunks. Days will go missing. Your sense of self will fracture, and eventually you'll reach a breaking point where the cycle just consumes you entirely. You'll become part of the infrastructure, literally embedded in the building's function. You'll be a maintenance subroutine that walks the hallways and maintains the protocols, but you won't be human anymore. You won't even be capable of understanding that you were ever human." I looked at the computer screen. 82 residents, officially counted as 47, existing in a liminal space between documented and disappeared. "How many staff members are integrated?" I asked. "All of them," Mrs. Voss said. "Dale, the nurses, the kitchen staff, the administrative assistants. Everyone who's worked here for more than 6 months has been integrated. We're a closed system, Thomas. The Covenant requires it. Fresh blood every few years to manage the day-to-day, but that blood always gets absorbed into the cycle, eventually. And you're offering me a choice about how fast that happens? I'm offering you mercy," Mrs. Voss said. "Take it or don't. Either way, you're staying." She turned to leave. I could see the hallway through her now. She was nearly invisible, just a suggestion of a silhouette in the dark. "One more thing," she said, without looking back. "Mrs. Chen is leaving tomorrow night. The cycle is finally claiming her fully. She's integrated so completely that she's starting to phase out of linear time. In a few days, she'll stop being a resident and start being part of the building itself. I thought you'd want to know, since she seemed fond of you." Then she was gone, and I was alone in the administrative office with 82 residents I'd never seen, 35 of whom officially didn't exist, and the understanding that every single person in this facility was slowly becoming part of something I still couldn't fully comprehend. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Choose fast. The rotations change at dawn. D." Outside the administrative office windows, the sky was beginning to lighten. The rotations would begin in minutes, and I still hadn't decided whether I was going to accept integration or break the covenant entirely. I tried to leave at 5:23 a.m. I walked out of the administrative office, through the lobby, toward the employee exit. My keys were in my pocket. My car was in the parking lot. The highway was less than a mile away. It seemed, in that moment, like the simplest thing in the world. Just walk out the door and drive away. The exit door was locked. Not locked in the normal sense. The handle turned, the mechanism engaged. But when I pushed, the door didn't open. Instead, it swung inward, into the building, not outward. I pushed again. Same result. The door opened onto the facility's interior corridor instead of the parking lot. I turned around and walked back through the lobby toward the main entrance. That door was glass, and I could see outside. The parking lot, my car, the early morning light. I pushed the door. It opened onto the hallway leading to the residential wing. I tried the doors in sequence. The north exit, the south exit, the emergency exits marked with glowing red signs. Every single door that should have led outside opened onto interior hallways instead. The geometry of the building had rearranged itself, or I was experiencing such severe time distortion that I was no longer moving through normal space. By 5:47 a.m., I'd given up on leaving through exits. I ran toward the parking lot through the windows, literally ran at the glass, thinking maybe I could break through. The glass held. It was warm to the touch, almost alive. When I turned around, the hallway had changed. The walls were a different color. The lighting was coming from a different direction, and standing at the end of the hallway, wearing a maintenance uniform I'd never seen before, was Dale. Except it wasn't quite Dale. It was Dale the way Mrs. Voss was, barely a person anymore. Translucent, layered, existing in multiple states simultaneously. I could see through him to the wall behind him. I could also see through the wall to something else, a space that didn't correspond to the building's interior layout. "You're resisting," Dale said. His voice had a quality of echo to it, like it was coming from very far away and very close at the same time. "I'm leaving," I said. "No, you're not," Dale replied. "The building won't let you. You've been integrated past the point of external exit. You're part of the cycle now. The only way out is through." "Through what?" "Acceptance," Dale said, "or completion." He moved toward me, and with each step, he became more transparent. I could see the hallway behind him, and beyond that, other hallways, other spaces, stacked on top of each other, like layers of an onion made of corridors. I ran in the opposite direction. I ran through hallways that looped back on themselves. I ran through corridors that seemed to stretch longer each time I traveled them. I ran past residents who were already beginning their rotation, moving in synchronized patterns that made no sense for 6 a.m. They didn't try to stop me. They just moved around me, through me almost, their paths and my path intersecting in ways that made my head hurt when I tried to comprehend them. At some point, I lost track of time completely. I found myself in a stairwell that went up and down simultaneously. I found a hallway that had 6 doors on the left side, but 7 on the right, creating an impossible asymmetry. I found a room that was either the break room, or a resident suite, or a maintenance closet, all 3 at different moments as I looked at it. By what my phone said was 7:14 a.m., I was somewhere on the 3rd floor, or maybe the ground floor. Spatial coordinates had stopped meaning anything. I sat down in what appeared to be a hallway and tried to think through what Mrs. Chen had told me. There were 3 choices: acceptance, resistance, or breach. Acceptance meant giving up, letting the integration complete, becoming a subroutine, a walking protocol, a piece of the building's function. Resistance meant fighting the cycle, experiencing accelerated integration, fracturing into psychological and spiritual pieces. Breach meant destroying the containment deliberately, breaking the covenant, probably dying in the process, but at least disrupting the eternal loop. I pulled out my phone. The battery was at 3%. The photos I'd taken in the administrative office were still there. The census records, the resident database discrepancy, Dale's notes about my accelerated integration. What I needed was to understand what would break the covenant, what would cause cascade failure, the protocols, the broken things that weren't supposed to be fixed. If I fixed them all, would the cycle collapse? I got to my feet and started moving with purpose now. Not running, just walking through the impossible hallways with intention. I was beginning to understand that the building responded to certainty, that when I panicked, it multiplied my confusion. But when I moved with purpose, the hallways almost cooperated. I found the toilet in room 307, the continuous flush, the deliberately rigged valve that kept the tank from sealing. I took out my multi-tool and began disassembling the mechanism. The moment I touched the valve, the hallway outside the room shifted. The walls became translucent. I could see through them to spaces beyond. Other rooms, other residents in other rooms, layers upon layers of the facility stacked into impossible configurations. And I could feel something, a vibration, not in the air, but in the building itself. a disturbance. I removed the valve and set it aside. The building shuddered. It was subtle at first, just a tremor, but then stronger. The lights flickered. The hallway walls rippled like they were made of water. I moved to the next room on Dale's protocol list. A light fixture with its black bulb wrapped in cloth from 1972. I unscrewed it carefully, removed the aged cloth, and replaced the corrupted bulb with a normal one. The building shuddered again, harder this time. I could hear something now, a sound like screaming, except it wasn't coming from any human throat. It was the building itself expressing distress. I worked faster, the stains on the baseboards. I scrubbed them with chemical cleaners, and where the solution touched them, the walls began to crack. The plumbing issues that were supposed to remain unfixed, I identified them and started repairs. Each action caused another shudder, another ripple through the facility's impossible geometry. Around what I thought was 8 a.m., I found myself in the third-floor corridor where the third-floor closet was located. The door was open now. The impossible depth inside was collapsing, the shelves falling inward into darkness, the old uniforms and supplies disintegrating into static. The ledgers were burning, not with fire, but with a kind of erosion. The pages were dissolving into ash, and at the center of it all, visible now in a way they hadn't been before, were the residents. All of them. Not just the ones I'd seen, but all 82. All 234 who'd ever been admitted to Cypress Haven. They were translucent now, layered on top of each other, occupying the same space simultaneously. They were screaming, that building sound I'd been hearing, and they were changing. Their forms were becoming unstable, flickering between human and architecture, between solid and structure, between people and protocols. I realized in that moment what integration actually meant. They didn't become part of the building. They became the building. They were the cycle. Their movements through the hallways weren't following a routine. They were the routine. Their existence wasn't maintaining the containment. Their existence was the containment. And I'd been disrupting the most fundamental part of that system. Mrs. Chen appeared beside me. She was barely visible now, just a sketch of a person drawn in fading light. "You're breaking it," she said. "Yes," I confirmed. "You can still stop," she said. "You can revert the changes, fix the things you've unfixed. The building will settle, you'll integrate, and we'll all go back to the rotations. And you'll keep dissolving. Eventually," she said, "but it will take decades. There's peace in that." I looked at her, this woman who'd warned me, who'd tried to help me understand, who was being slowly erased by the very system she was part of. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know," Mrs. Chen replied. "That's why you're the one breaking it instead of accepting it. That's the only reason any of this matters." The building was shaking harder now. The walls were cracking. I could see outside through the cracks, not the parking lot, but something else. Something that might have been sky, or might have been void. Something that existed in the space before the facility existed. And I could feel Dale approaching, and Mrs. Voss, and all the integrated staff moving through the collapsing corridors with purpose, trying to stop me, trying to restore the containment. I had maybe 5 minutes before they reached me. 5 minutes to finish what I'd started, or 5 minutes to change my mind and accept integration instead. My hand hovered over the last protocol item on my list, the sealed room on the ground floor that wasn't supposed to be opened under any circumstances. The room that didn't appear on any official blueprints. The room that Mrs. Chen had never mentioned, because even she didn't know what was inside. The room where whatever the building was containing, whatever required 234 integrated residents to keep it stable, was actually kept. I moved toward the stairwell. The building was coming apart at the seams. and I was going to finish what I'd started. Consequences be damned. I'm not entirely sure how much time has passed since I opened that sealed room. Days, maybe, or weeks, or longer. Time doesn't work the way it used to at Cypress Haven. Not since the Cascade failure. Not since the moment I disabled the final protocol and watched the containment system begin its collapse. What I remember is the room itself, the space behind the sealed door on the ground floor. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a creature or a being or anything with a form I could describe. It was more like a space, a gap in reality, a place where things were wrong in a way that human brains aren't really equipped to process. Looking at it for more than a few seconds caused nosebleeds. Looking at it for longer than that caused something worse, a kind of existential disorientation where you forget why you exist at all. I didn't look at it for very long. What I did do was turn off the life support, not systems designed to contain it, but systems designed to sustain it, to keep it stable, to maintain the agreement between it and the world. The Cascade failure was immediate. The building began to collapse, not in a physical sense, but in a conceptual one. The impossible geometry resolved into normal geometry. The layered spaces unwound. The 234 residents, all those integrated people, suddenly existed in linear space and linear time again. They materialized in hallways and rooms and corridors, all at once, all disoriented, all screaming that building sound that wasn't quite a scream. Except they weren't themselves anymore. Integration had progressed too far. They were more architecture than person. When the cascade began, they started to fragment, to break down into component parts. Their bodies became corridors. Their consciousness became protocols. Their existence became abstract. I don't think they suffered. I think they were too far gone to suffer in any meaningful way. The sealed room, the gap, the space, the thing that needed containing, began to expand, to push outward. The walls of the facility couldn't hold it. The building started to dissolve. Not collapse, dissolve. Like the walls were made of sugar in water, slowly becoming translucent, then transparent, then ceasing to exist at all. I remember running. I remember Dale grabbing my arm, his translucent hand passing partially through my skin. I remember Mrs. Voss trying to say something, her words coming out as static. I remember making it to the main entrance and running into the parking lot as the building behind me began to unmake itself. My car was still there. It started. I drove. I don't know how long I drove. I remember the highway stretching in impossible directions. I remember exits that weren't on any map. I remember arriving at my apartment, though the drive should have taken 20 minutes, and I'm fairly certain I lost 6 hours somewhere between the facility and my home. For 3 days, or what felt like 3 days, I thought it was over. I thought I'd broken the covenant. I thought I'd destroyed the system. I thought I'd saved everyone, or damned everyone, or both simultaneously. Then the facility rebuilt itself. Not in the same location, not in the same configuration, but it came back. I received a phone call on a number I'd never given anyone. It was Dale. "Cypress Haven is reopening," he said, his voice exactly as it had always been. No echo now, no translucence. He sounded almost human. "We're looking for maintenance staff. Interested?" "No," I said. "I think you will be," Dale replied. "Come back and see for yourself." I hung up. I didn't answer when he called back, but I dreamed about it. Every night for a week, I dreamed about the facility, and the dreams were so vivid, so detailed, that I began to question whether I'd actually escaped, whether I was actually in my apartment, or whether I was still in that collapsing building, experiencing a hallucination of escape. On the 8th day, I got in my car and drove back toward where Cypress Haven used to be. It was there, rebuilt, Slightly different architecture, but fundamentally the same structure, same layout, same purpose. And when I walked into the employee entrance, I found Dale standing in the lobby, waiting for me. "You came back," he said. "I didn't mean to," I said, but I wasn't sure if that was true. "You did," Dale said, "because you're already integrated. You have been since the moment you opened that sealed room. The cascade didn't break the system, it reset it, and you were reset along with it. Now you're part of the new cycle." I wanted to deny it, but I could feel it. The way time moved strangely around the edges of my perception. The way the hallways seemed to reconfigure themselves based on where I wanted to go. The way I remembered things that hadn't happened yet and couldn't quite remember things that had. "What happened to the residents?" I asked. "They integrated," Dale said simply. "Fully this time. There's no distinction between them and the building anymore. They are Cypress Haven, and Cypress Haven is them. The new system is actually more efficient than the old one. We only need 2 staff members to maintain it now. Mrs. Voss in administration, and you as maintenance." "And you?" "I'm transitioning," Dale said. "Moving into resident. Status. It's time. I've held the maintenance position for 37 years. The cycle needs renewal. You'll understand that eventually." I walked through the facility. It looked exactly the same as it always had. Cream walls, landscape paintings, the smell of industrial cleaner, and something else underneath. I found myself in hallway after hallway, and I realized I was walking the rotations. My feet were moving through the patterns that the residents used to walk, that they still walk, except now they're walking through walls, through infrastructure, through the building's own structure. I found the sealed room still existed. The door was different now. Ordinary, unmarked, just another maintenance closet. When I opened it, I saw supplies, old uniforms, logbooks, everything you'd expect. Except at the back, visible only from certain angles, was the gap, the space, the thing that still needed containing. And I realized something. Standing there in that closet, the cascade hadn't destroyed anything. It had just accelerated the process. The facility was going to consume me eventually anyway. It was going to make me part of the structure, part of the rotations, part of the infinite maintenance cycle that kept the containment stable. The sealed room had always been my destination. By choosing to resist, I'd simply chosen how quickly I arrived. I'm training a new maintenance worker tonight. His name is Marcus. He's 34 years old, recently unemployed, looking for stable work. He seems like a good candidate, observant, capable, thoughtful, the kind of person who pays attention to details, the kind of person the cycle prefers. I'm rushing through the orientation, mentioning the long-standing protocols without elaboration, pointing out the maintenance-restricted areas, hinting that certain parts of the facility require very specific maintenance procedures. Marcus keeps asking questions. Good questions. I remember asking those same questions once. "What's that locked closet on the 3rd floor?" he asks as we pass it. I feel something shift inside me, a kind of resignation, a kind of peace. I understand now why Dale rushed through my orientation, why he didn't want me to understand the system until I was already inside it, because understanding changes nothing. "Oh, that?" I say, keeping my voice casual, friendly. "That's just maintenance storage, nothing you need to worry about." He looks at me with suspicion, but he accepts the lie. I can feel the cycle breathing around us both, feel it noticing him, cataloging him, preparing him for the integration that will eventually claim him, just as it claimed me, just as it claims everyone. Tonight, I'll finish the orientation. Tomorrow night, he'll start his first shift. Within a few weeks, he'll ask about that closet. Eventually, he'll open it, and the cycle will continue. The building never stops rebuilding itself. The residents never stop walking their rotations. The protocols never stop demanding maintenance. And the staff, We continue training replacements, warning them inadequately, watching them figure out the truth exactly as we figured it out. There is peace in this, I think. Terrible, quiet peace. There is no escape from Cypress Haven. There is only the long, slow understanding that you were never supposed to escape, that this is how it's always been, that this is how it will always be. And standing in these cream-colored hallways, watching Marcus look nervously at that locked closet on the 3rd floor, I feel something close to compassion for him, because he's going to make the same choices I made, or he's going to make different choices that lead to exactly the same outcome. Either way, Marcus is already part of Cypress Haven. He just doesn't know it yet.